Diep and CEO James postponed their flight to fight a flash flood together. The sky had turned an ominous shade of gray. Rain pounded the rooftops like war drums, and wind howled through the narrow streets of the village where Diep had once sold vegetables under a fragile tarpaulin. She was standing in the airport with CEO James, suitcase in hand, passport ready, the boarding gate calling their names. A new life abroad awaited them, a promise of peace, privacy, and healing. But then the phone rang. The voice on the other end was trembling. A flash flood was sweeping through her hometown. The river had risen too fast. Roads were cut off. People were trapped. Diep's eyes filled with tears. She looked at James, not just the man she loved, but the one who had seen her courage, her dreams, and her fears. He could have said, "Let's go. It's too dangerous." But instead, he took her hand and whispered, "Let's go home. They need us." Without another word, they turned around. The next few days were chaos, but also unforgettable. James rolled up his sleeves beside farmers and laborers. Diep organized volunteers, distributed food, and comforted crying children. Side by side, in mud and rain, they saved lives. James used his company's resources to send water, purifiers, generators, and medical supplies. Helicopters hovered. Boats carried the sick to safety. In the darkest hours, when the power was gone and the rain wouldn't stop, Diep and James lit candles in shelters and told stories to keep hope alive. For the villagers, they were no longer just a couple. They were family, proof that love is not just about living together, but fighting for others together. The power of purpose, they postponed their dream of escape, only to find something greater, a purpose that made their bond unbreakable. A CEO and a girl from the market, saving lives not with titles or money, but with heart. In the end, the floodwaters receded, but the impact of what they did remained. And though the flight was missed, a bigger journey had begun, one of selflessness, love, and shared courage. A new dawn after the storm. The village was quiet now. The floodwaters had withdrawn like a monster finally tamed, leaving behind broken homes, scattered memories, and survivors with weary but hopeful eyes. The sun rose for the first time in days, casting a golden light over the muddy ground where Diep and CEO James stood side by side. They had barely slept. Their clothes were stained, and their hands were blistered from carrying sandbags, lifting debris, and holding trembling hands. But their spirits had never been stronger. Local families gathered around them, offering sweet potatoes, boiled eggs, and warm tea, humble gifts of gratitude that meant the world. One elderly woman clutched James's arm and whispered through tears, "You're not just our boss, you're our son now." James glanced at Diep. She smiled gently, her heart full. This was home, not a penthouse in New York, not a villa in Paris, but here, where they were needed. Rebuilding more than just homes. In the following weeks, James used his company's resources to fund rebuilding efforts. Temporary shelters were replaced by sturdy homes. A new school was built on higher ground. Crops were replanted with better irrigation. He also created a rural job program, hiring locals to work on cleanup and infrastructure, ensuring they could earn income while healing their own land. Diep, meanwhile, became a beacon of hope for the women in the village. She taught them basic health care, self-protection during floods, and even set up evening classes for girls who had missed school during the crisis. Her past of selling vegetables made her relatable, and her compassion made her unforgettable. The media eventually found their story. The CEO and the village girl who chose their people over a plane ticket. It went viral. But James declined interviews. "We didn't do it to be seen," he said. "We did it because it was the right thing." Love that grows in the mud. One evening, under a sky full of stars, James took Diep's hand as they sat on a haystack near the fields. "I never thought I'd feel so alive here," he said. "You've changed me." She looked at him, her eyes soft with emotion. "No," she whispered. "You found who you were always meant to be." There was no airport in sight, No departure gates, no urgent plans. Just the sound of frogs croaking and the scent of fresh earth after rain. James reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, velvet box. The ring sparkled in the moonlight. "To Diep," he said, voice trembling, "will you marry me? Not as a CEO's wife, not in a mansion abroad, but right here where our hearts learn to fight together." Tears welled in her eyes. She nodded. "Yes, James, 1,000 times yes." A village wedding, a global heart. The news of Diep and CEO James's engagement spread like wildfire through the village. The people who once saw James as a distant, powerful man now saw him as one of their own. The man who ate from their clay bowls, wiped sweat from his brow beside them, and found love in the most unexpected place. The wedding was set for a month later, right in the village where their love had blossomed. There were no lavish ballrooms, no red carpets or glittering chandeliers. Instead, the couple chose the open field beside the rebuilt school, a symbol of hope, change, and new beginnings. Women of the village stitched to Diep dye by hand, a soft ivory silk dress embroidered with lotus flowers, symbolizing purity rising from the mud. James wore a traditional Vietnamese khăn mong, tailored just for him by the village tailor who insisted it be a gift. On the morning of the ceremony, the village children lined the paths with wildflowers. Local musicians played folk instruments, blending the sounds of the land with laughter and celebration. James stood waiting under a bamboo arch, his eyes scanning the path until he saw her, to Diep, walking slowly with a gentle breeze at her back, her eyes shimmering like the morning dew. She wasn't just beautiful, she was radiant with meaning, strength, and grace. They exchanged vows not with grand words, but with promises forged through shared storms, in flood or drought, in wealth or struggle. "I choose you." As they kissed, the villagers cheered, chickens clucked, and fireworks made from rice paper popped in the sky. It wasn't just a wedding, it was a celebration of resilience, of love rooted in earth and soul. A new mission, building bridges, not just businesses. After the wedding, James didn't return to his high-rise office in the city. Instead, he converted part of his company's budget into a newfound ASIAN, the Riverlight Project, focused on sustainable development in rural areas vulnerable to climate change. He and Diep traveled from province to province, listening to farmers, helping build levees, introducing solar-powered irrigation, and supporting young girls' education. She became the face of compassion, he, the engine of innovation. Together, they were unstoppable. A letter to the future. One quiet evening, sitting by the rebuilt bridge near their village home, Diep turned to James with a thoughtful smile. "If we have a child one day," she said, "I want them to know that love isn't about where you're born or what you own. It's about what you give and who you become when everything else washes away." James kissed her forehead, his heart full. And from the place where floodwaters once tried to erase everything, they built a legacy that the world would never forget. Months passed peacefully after the wedding, and the seasons in the village changed gently, from the golden harvest of autumn to the soft chill of winter. Diep and James continued their tireless work, rebuilding not just homes, but trusts, education, and futures. One morning, as the sun filtered through the curtain of their wooden home, Diep sat silently by the window, her hands resting gently on her stomach. James walked in holding the steaming cups of ginger tea. When he saw her teary smile, his heart skipped a beat. She whispered softly, "I think I'm pregnant." For a moment, time seemed to stop. James set the cups down, knelt before her, and placed his hand over hers. His eyes filled with wonder, disbelief, and overwhelming joy. "A child," he murmured. "Our child, in this world we've fought so hard to protect." Diep nodded, and together they embraced, wrapped in sunlight, love, and the quiet promise of a future blooming from everything they had endured. Challenges return, but so does strength. Not long after the news of the pregnancy, unexpected floods swept through a neighboring village. Bridges collapsed, crops were destroyed, Families were stranded. The Riverlight Project team immediately mobilized. But this time, James hesitated. "You should stay," he told Diep gently. "You're carrying our future now." She looked at him, determined but calm. "I will rest, I promise. But let me write to the women there. Let them know they're not forgotten. Let them know someone understands from her bed." She wrote letters, coordinated relief, and arranged food and medical support with a grace that left James in awe. Even in stillness, she was a force of change. The birth of dawn. On a quiet spring morning, after hours of labor, Diep gave birth to a baby girl. The midwife, an old woman who had delivered dozens of children in the village, held the newborn high and said, "She is strong, like her mother." James looked at the tiny face, her fist curled as if she was ready to take on the world. They named her Minha, meaning bright summer, a name filled with warmth, light, and rebirth. The whole village celebrated. Flags were raised. Music played. For this child was not just the daughter of a CEO and a girl from the market. She was the living symbol of what could be built from ruin, of how love could conquer even nature's fiercest trials. Legacy. Years later, when Minha asked her parents how they met, they would smile and tell her not just a love story, but a tale of courage, storms, sacrifice, and second chances. And as she listened, the little girl would laugh, unaware yet of the weight of the legacy in her name, but certain of one thing: she was born of love, and that love would one day change the world again. From the journey of Diep and CEO James, we learn that true love is not just about grand promises or beautiful words. It's about standing beside each other in storms, both real and emotional. When everything around them collapsed, companies, reputations, homes, they chose not to run. They chose to rebuild. They didn't let fear lead them. They let kindness, trust, and sacrifice light their path. We learn that success is not measured by wealth or titles, but by how many lives you lift with your own. CEO James, once a man of power, found his true strength not in a corporate tower, but in the muddy streets of a flooded village, holding the hand of the woman he loved. Diep, a humble village girl, showed us that the heart can lead where the mind hesitates. Her quiet courage, her empathy, and her unwavering spirit became the roots of a new beginning. And most importantly, their story reminds us that every ending can become a new beginning, if we dare to love again, to fight again, and to believe again. Lesson summary: love is tested in difficult times, not easy ones. True courage is choosing to build again after losing everything. Small acts of kindness can heal great pain. Standing beside someone in their weakest moment is the strongest kind of love. When we live with love and purpose, we leave behind a legacy greater than any empire. Their story teaches us that life will never wait for us to be fully ready. Storms come without warning. Tragedy strikes without mercy. But what defines us is how we choose to respond, with fear or with hope. When the floodwaters rose, James and Diep chose to stay and serve. They paused their dreams not because they gave up, but because they understood something deeper. Sometimes, the greatest purpose is not in chasing the world, but in protecting the people who are already in it. James, once obsessed with deadlines and deals, learned to find joy in muddy hands and shared soup. Diep, who once questioned her worth beside a powerful man, realized that her strength was the very light that held him together. They showed us that resilience is not loud. It is quiet. It looks like holding each other at night, when there are no answers, only faith. They showed us that home is not a place, but a person, and that sometimes true leadership means kneeling beside the weakest, not standing above them.